What's up, Night Owl? Steely here, back with another Rime of the Frostmaiden video, and today I'm going to be helping you get ready to run Chapter 3. Now here's the thing about Chapter 3. It's entirely possible that your party may skip it altogether. So when you do your prep work, try to keep in mind that the party may just end up in Chapter 4 and just completely skip Sunblight altogether. So read both of those chapters. Those two, at the beginning of Chapter 3, the party's going to have an option. The dragon's going to emerge from Sunblight Tower, and the party's going to have an option whether they want to go left or right. And that is they chase down the dragon or they go inside of the tower. The tower being Chapter 3, which is what I'm going to cover in the next video, and which I'm going to help you get ready for in this video. And then Chapter 4, where they chase down the dragon. Now, before your party is given this option and before the big event where the dragon emerges from Sunblight and the party has to decide, what I would recommend, and what I did, was I devoted an entire session to building up to this point where they make the decision whether to go into Sunblight or to chase the dragon. And the reason for this session, and the reason I recommend that you do the same, is it will build up a lot of tension and a lot of suspense when it comes to that point where the dragon comes out of the tower. But in order to achieve that dramatic effect, there's a few things that your party needs to know about. For one, the dragon is made out of Chardalyn, and if your party doesn't know what Chardalyn is, there's a lot that's going to be lost in that whole dramatic reveal of this dragon made entirely out of this demonic glass. So at some point, your party's going to need to learn about Chardalyn. Also, there's not a whole lot of opportunities throughout Chapter 1 or Chapter 2 to introduce the Duergar and the fact that Duergar are here living on the surface. This is a big deal. Duergar, as a matter of fact, Sunblight believes himself to be like this prodigal, not necessarily messiah, but he thinks of himself as a big deal. And he is, because he is establishing a Duergar city, a Duergar outpost on the surface. Duergar are mostly underground. That's where they build all the things. That's where their capital is. So having a Duergar on the surface, that's a big deal. And you want to emphasize that to your party and to the party members that don't know how important this is. So those are the two things. They need to know about Chardalyn, they need to know about Duergar, and they need to know that Duergar are here on the surface. The other thing that your party needs when they transition to Chapter 3 is they need to be level 5. This is important, at least by the book, because Sunblight is designed to take the party to level 6 and no further. The book actually emphasizes in Chapter 3 that Sunblight Tower, the Chapter 3 dungeon, will take them to level 6 and no farther. So if the party goes in at level 6, they won't get that level. So they want to go into the tower at level 5 or earlier if you feel like. I personally went with level 5. So once your party's level 5, you need to be working them towards Sunblight, and then they'll get their 6th level in Sunblight. Unless, of course, they veer off and take out the dragon, in which case it's going to be tricky if they do the dragon first, because then they'll get to level 6 and then they won't get benefits from Sunblight. Handle that however you see fit. I personally would allow them to get that 7th level if they deal with the dragon and then do Sunblight. I don't necessarily like the idea of them dealing with the dragon and then leaving Sunblight, like, especially if the party wants to go deal with the Duergar now that the dragon is done. So you can kind of throw out that rule. If the party decides to do the dragon first, let them get that level 6 and let them go into Sunblight at level 6. The power difference between level 5 and 6 is not that big. They don't get a new spell level. They don't get an extra attack. They don't get anything crazy between 5th and 6th. They get a little extra spell slot. That's about it. Nothing. There's no huge power spike. So going in at 6th level, not that big a deal. A couple more hit points, a couple more spell slots. It's fine. As far as gear and equipment goes, they should have the typical gear of a 5th level party. They should have +1 weapons, a good assortment of potions and scrolls, etc. Things like that. They should be well equipped going into this big dungeon. And I'll make some suggestions when I go over how I personally ran the pre-session leading up to Sunblight. I'll kind of throw in some suggestions on how to cover that loot. Now, the big item that I'm on the fence about is a potion of sea invisibility. They're going into a Duergar fortress, and Duergar naturally have invisibility. So I gave my parties that got to Sunblight a single potion of sea invisibility. It lasts 1 hour. And as a DM, if you're feeling generous, you can give them this potion, but make sure you understand the consequences of that. There's a few instances in Sunblight where there will be a hidden Duergar watching the party and seeing their moves. You need to be prepared for that. A see invisibility lasts an hour, so it won't go away until they take a short rest. So from the moment, if they're smart, best case scenario for the party, I guess worst case for you as the DM, is as soon as the party approaches Sunblight, they drink their scout drinks the see invisibility potion, and for the next hour, they can see all the Duergar regardless of invisibility. And that will create a lot of opportunities for the party that I personally liked. I like the roleplay aspect of a Duergar hiding and keeping an eye out, and the party kind of making decisions based on that. So that's entirely up to you. If you want those interactions, if you have ideas for it, read through the section. I'll cover it more in detail in the chapter 3 video, and read through the book and look for those opportunities where Duergar are hiding. There's several. They're Duergar. And think about that and consider giving them a potion of see invisibility as some kind of maybe side reward. Have a little side quest and give them a see invisibility potion as kind of a reward for doing that little side quest to get them ready for Sunblight. Now I'm going to go over that pre-chapter 3 game session that I ran. And now I was really happy with the results of this game session. And going forward, I think in all of my Rime of the Frostmaiden games, I'm going to have a session laid out similar to this one, leading up to chapter 3 and 4. And it covers all of the bases that I talked about. It reveals what Chardalyn is, the Duergar. It provides some equipment opportunities, things like that. Overall, this is a good session, and I would recommend that you do this session, how I'm about to lay it out, for your party before they do chapter 3 or 4. The first thing that you want to do when you start the session off, whether the party starts in a dungeon or in a town, is you want to introduce them to Chardalyn. Just a small amount, a sliver of it, a dagger, some kind of small weapon, maybe a little chunk of it. Just introduce them to the concept of Chardalyn. You can give them a history roll if you like, or you can just tell them what it is. Maybe one of the party members have heard of it based off backstories. This part is up to you, but introduce them to Chardalyn and give them some hints to what it is and what it does. Now, depending on where the party starts this session, if they're in the dungeon, this part's easy. You can just have one of the monsters or one of the enemies in this dungeon have one of these Chardalyn weapons, or they can find it in a chest. Wherever you lay out some loot, throw in a Chardalyn weapon. If your party does not have a +1 weapon, if a party member doesn't have a +1 weapon, choose whatever weapon that they prefer and then just make that Chardalyn. So they find, maybe you have a party member that prefers longswords. Give them a Chardalyn, +1 Chardalyn longsword. And once that party member has that +1 weapon made out of Chardalyn, you can start introducing the properties of that Chardalyn. Not just the history roll where they learn about it, but also introduce that kind of demonic energy and how it kind of sickens them a little bit. Just roleplay. Do not do mechanics with this one. I know the book suggests that you do an alignment shift. Screw that. Throw that out. Just have you feel nauseous as you use the weapon, or you start getting haunted by visions as you hold the weapon. Just things like that. That adds plenty. You don't need to do any kind of mechanical things in order to emphasize the demonic energy in this Chardalyn weapon. So once they have that +1 Chardalyn weapon, they're going to want to cleanse it. And the options for cleansing it could be anything like a Dispel Magic or a Consecrate, a Bless. This is entirely up to you. You can also add an NPC back at town that could provide the means to cure this Chardalyn weapon. And at this point, you can introduce the next sort of transition, the next piece of the puzzle, the Duergar. Now, in this hypothetical game session that I'm pitching to you, I'm assuming that your party has no idea what Chardalyn is and no idea what Duergar are. So if they're in town, at some point, they're going to need to travel. And while they're traveling, they can encounter some Duergar. If they're back at the dungeon, that's easy. On the way back to town, they find some Duergar. Now, the way that I ran this encounter is I put a sled out in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the snow, and the party just kind of came across this sled with a tarp over it. And when they went to go inspect it, a bunch of Duergar, about 7 is a pretty good option for a 5th level party, but you can gauge those numbers however you see fit. Just a big group of Duergar popped out from invisibility, enlarged, and started swinging at the party. Once the party is dealt with it, they can inspect the sled, and it's there they'll find a crate of Chardalyn, lots of this stuff. And then they can start kind of piecing together the fact that the Duergar are collecting this stuff. Maybe they've heard rumors about that in the first place, and now they confirmed it, Either way, now you've introduced Duergar to the surface. You've introduced a large amount of Charlatan, enough for the party to piece together the fact that the Duergar are looking for this stuff, and then they can start asking questions. What do they want with it? And at that point, you can give them an NPC that will lead them to Sunblight. If they captured one of the Duergar at this sled, they can ask questions, figure out where Sunblight is and what the Duergar are doing. What I personally did was I did not say that the Duergar were building a weapon out of Charlatan. This gives too many hints toward that dragon. I don't want that. I want the big reveal to the dragon to be like a dragon. So what I did was I hinted to the fact that they were building an army. They're equipping themselves with Charlatan weapons and Charlatan armor, things like that. Hint more towards that they're equipping their army with this stuff. And that should be scary enough on its own. And then when the big reveal that there's a dragon, you're golden. Now, so far in this game session, the party has found a sliver of Charlatan. They followed up on that. They found a group of Duergar on the surface collecting massive amounts of Charlatan. Now they need to start role-playing with NPCs, whether that be the Duergar prisoner that they took here at this sled. If they killed all of them, that's fine. Wherever they were going, have an NPC there that will tell them, hey, we found some Duergar, we asked them questions, we know where their fortress is. Will you go deal with it? And at that point, you can fill this session with anything else that you see fit, any kind of cliffhangers you left off from previous sessions. But from here, once they know the location of Sunblight and they get there, that's your game session. End it as soon as that dragon flies out of the tower. That will pretty much be the rest of the game session, leading up to the dragon flying out of Sunblight. And the reason for that is you kind of want to leave them on a cliffhanger, leave them something to look forward to in that next game session. But that's a whole nother video. That's a whole nother topic on just DMing overall and how to run a session. That's beyond the scope of this video, but I like the idea of leaving them on a cliffhanger, especially for this part, because that will give them the opportunity throughout the week or however long the period is between your game sessions. They can think about what they want to do, whether they chase the dragon, go into the tower, and you can start listening to their ideas and prepping for what you think they're going to do. I would recommend being prepared for both of them because you never know. They might just change their mind at the last minute. So just be ready for both of them, but you can at least listen to their ideas and kind of go from there. And if whatever they picked up on from the previous session, whether they were in a dungeon and they finished it up, or if they were in town, they had NPCs to roleplay with, they dealt with the Duergar in the sled. If for whatever reason you have an opening, you have more time to fill, you can easily throw in another one of the Chapter 2 locations on their way to Sunblight. They can find It Ascendant, they can find the Cackling Chasm. Pick a short one, put it in there on their way to Sunblight if you want to fill in, or maybe just an ice troll, and a random encounter of some kind. Just you can fill in easily with the travel, or you can give them an avalanche while they climb the mountain. There's tons of options. Just give them a little bit of a filler if need be, depending on time. And then when they reach Sunblight, you can give them the big reveal that there's a dragon. They're building a dragon out of Charlatan. It's going to fly out of Sunblight. It's going to head to 10 towns, and the party has to decide, do we take on the tower? Do we take on the dragon? Boom. There's your game session. And once you get to this point, your next game session, maybe even the session after, are pretty much done for you. They're either going to go inside Sunblight, which is a massive dungeon, will take up at least one session, maybe two, or they're going to go chase down that dragon, at which point there's a game session right there. And again, I would recommend that since they're level 5, if they decide to chase down the dragon, they get level 6 by defeating the dragon, dealing with that, and then they can get level 7 inside of Sunblight. This is entirely up to you, but I don't like the idea that they don't get that level for completing Sunblight. Whether they're 5th or 6th, I feel like they should get that 7th level from doing both of these Chapter 3 and Chapter 4. And that's it. That's what I think that your party should have and what your party should know going into Chapter 3. And just a recap, start the session off, introduce them to Charlatan, whether that be like a sliver of it or one of their +1 weapons, introduce them to a +1 weapon if they don't have one already, +1 Charlatan weapon, at which point they can go and cure it as part of this game session, whether that be an NPC in town or they got to go on an adventure to like a hermit out in the middle of nowhere. While they're traveling, they run into some Duergar and a sled, at which point they'll learn about Duergar and the fact that they have a tower, and they'll realize that the Duergar are collecting Charlatan, and then they can find out and do some research about where this tower is, and then wrap up the game session with them reaching the tower and the dragon emerging. Perfect game session, spot on. I'm going to run every Rime of the Frostmaiden just like that. I'm going to have that session play out exactly like that, leading into chapter 3. Hey, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, you know how YouTube works. Hit those buttons, leave a comment down below. Let me know how you got ready for chapter 3. Did I leave anything out? What magic items did you provide? Spell scrolls, potions? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want to be a part of this D&D community, make sure you join the Discord. The link in the description. Come by, ask questions, let me know what you think. And as always, I'll see you at sundown.